the animal, it's an even cone, it's going to be about 19 inches in diameter, which is a pretty good size animal.
And again, that says something about Nautiloids in the Ordovician. These guys were the top dogs. They were the pinnacle of evolution in the Ordovician. These things were coordinated. They had brains. They had eyes, or at least light-sensitive materials. They had tentacles. They had beaks. They had a well-developed nervous system. They had an enlarged respiratory system. These things were very sophisticated animals, and that's why they exploded on the scene in the Ordovician as, I think, top-of-the-line predators. One of the things when you get into the Cope Formation and the Point Pleasant and the Clay's Ferry Formation in northern Kentucky, along with Treptoceros and Cameroceros or Triandoceros, what you find is a variety, or three other genera of nautiloids that are found in no other part of the section in the Cincinnatian. And they are found, they're most common, and were all originally described from upstate New York in these late Chatfieldian Trenton limestone and the succeeding Utica shale formation. And this is one of these forms. This is Isoorthoceras. This is another longicunate form, very similar to Treptoceros, but a lot smaller. And the siphuncle in this thing is very tubular. The segments are only slightly expanded. You have well-developed cameral deposits, well-developed parietal deposits apically in this thing, but the segments are much smaller and they don't change their shape as they do in Treptoceros. The cameri are usually somewhat narrower as well. This is Isoorthoceras albersi, described by Miller and Faber from northern Kentucky, and has this fine ornamentation of these longitudinal raised lyri. This is Isoorthoceras rogersensis, described by Forsty from the Clay's Ferry. And it has these longitudinal striae, but it also has crisscrossing transverse striae that make this pattern here. These things are very similar to these guys. This is Isoorthoceras strangulatum from the Trenton limestone in New York. And this is Isoorthoceras strigatum, which is very similar to this guy, to albersi. It has these longitudinal lyri. So we got these New York folks coming down to the Cincinnati area at the beginning of the Cope, at the end of as the Lexington, as these clastic sediments came into the area, along came these nautiloids as well. So we had Treptoceros and Triandoceros, and then we had these New Yorkers coming in and hanging around for a very short period of time. This is another one of these New Yorkers where Isoorthoceras is a little guy, this is a big guy. This form was described as Orthoceras ludlowensis by Miller and Faber from right across the river in Covington, Kentucky, in the Point Pleasant or the base of the Cope, whatever you want to call that. Very large forms. These things are 1.25 meters, so they're about 3 or 4 feet in length, up to about 5, 7, 8 inches in diameter. Very distinctive, deep cameri, a large or a narrow tubular siphuncle that I think is dorsally located, and then is very distinctive episeptal and hyposeptal cameral deposits and these little annuli along the septal necks. These forms are identical, in my opinion, to Orthoceras amplicameratum Hall, again from the Trenton Formation and the Utica Shale in New York. And this form was described first by Hall, so it has priority. So I think these are the same things. These compare very closely to this guy, which is Geysonoceros ribel from the succeeding Silurian. This form, these Geysonoceros, became the preeminent nautiloids in the Silurian. And we see the beginnings of their lineage back here in the Ordovician. These things are, unfortunately, not very common. I don't think they're so big, I think they would stand out. They're much more common than it appears in New York than they are here in Cincinnati. And this is the third of these New Yorkers that came into the Cincinnati area at the base of the coast. This is Nautiloids, which is a small coiled form. This is what I was talking about, a hypognomic sinus. This is the ventral part of the body chamber. And you can see this indentation or groove. And this is thought to facilitate this hose-like hypognom, which could then be moved around and shoot water and push the animal backwards and forwards and up and down. Kind of like, very similar to what we see in modern day models. Again, this thing is evolutely coiled, very depressed cross-section. These things get they're usually about 1 inch to 3 inches in diameter. Very similar to the genotype Nautiloids Ammononius Conrad, which again is from the Trenton Utica section in New York State. So it's interesting that we get these guys coming in with these clastic facies at the base of the Cincinnati. At the other end of the section, we get up into the Richmondian. Things start to change, both in terms of environments and lithologies and in nautiloid faunas. As I mentioned, in the Edenian and the Maysvillian, most of this area, which is now east central U.S., it was all clastic, predominantly clastic shallow marine facies. And it was surrounded by these tropical carbonate platform facies, which formed this Arctic Ordovician fauna at the same time, in the Edenian and Maysvillian. Beginning in the Richmondian, conditions started to change in the Cincinnati area. These clastics started drying up. We started getting a shallowing of the seas in the area and an increase in carbonate, in limestone deposition. And as this environment changed in here, we began to see other types of nautiloids coming into this area, where